Hi, I'm really excited for today's episode because I get to speak to a pioneer, Tom Paton. In a world of firsts, he has a really good one. He made the first full-length animated feature film, Where the Robots Grow, which was written, directed, produced, and delivered using generative AI tools throughout the workflow. It's the first of its kind, and Tom didn't just make the film, he built the studio to make it happen. That studio is AImation, and in it, Tom is changing both how creators make feature films with smaller teams, short timelines, and shockingly low cost, but also how people consume animated content through their gamified app that's delivering eyeballs and engagement across a whole new content sector. Tom isn't just waiting around for the future to arrive, he's designing it frame by frame. And this episode is for people who aren't just imagining what Gen AI could become, but are using it today to reduce costs, unlock creativity, and challenge legacy production models. I'm really impressed by Tom, and I think you will be too. I really enjoy this episode because his enthusiasm for what's ahead for creators is infectious. There's no fat in this episode. It's wall-to-wall vision and inspiration. Tom's journey is filled with lessons about what these tools can do, what they still can't, but also how to stay creatively and ethically grounded when everything is changing all at once. I really like this episode. I think you will too. Please stick around. In the time between us trying to record and then having technical issues, and today, I think answers have changed. I mean, VO3 just came out yesterday, and I think Google Flow, I think they've fundamentally changed the game.
Yeah, look, the tech is, it advances at such a rapid pace now, from a filmmaking perspective, at least. I certainly, can speak as a former VFX artist. It feels like being in the middle of a singularity. It's like you're trying to keep pace with something that just can't be controlled in that respect. But, I think that's why, as a company, we've been focusing on building that direct-to-consumer relationship through gamified video on demand. And, we have our own backend that is designed to work entirely with these new changes. So when a VO3 drops, it just slots into what we're doing. It actually just accelerates our pipeline. So, yeah, it's crazy times out there, to be honest.
I heard somebody actually say that. They said, you know that you're doing something better than a rapper, and you know that you're doing something that you're on the right side of the tech if when things release it makes your tech better, not makes it obsolete. And I think that's a balance I think everybody's trying to strike right now.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Look, the thing with the film industry is, you're kind of trying to see people skin graft this technology onto their existing workflows and having real trouble with it. It's not necessarily conducive. It doesn't want to be in bed with the traditional pipeline. So, there's a few companies out there. I like to think we're one of them where, we speak fluent tech, but we speak fluent production as well. And we know the demands of both. And, it's interesting when you see these big tools drop because they always, from an engineering perspective, blow my mind. But then from a production perspective, I go, but how are you going to use that? How's that going to work? Once you start stringing more than a 2-minute trailer together, how does that actually work? How does that actually benefit us? And so, I'm always trying to approach the tech we build in-house with that in mind and just make sure you never get washed away. You don't want to be a rapper, but you also want to make sure that you can use the API keys to the best of their ability.
Yeah, and I do think that that's the mark of creative people or people who have worked in the creative space for a long time is your imagination is always going to be just that other side of the tech. If the day before VO3 launched, your imagination went as far as this, the moment VO3 comes out, you go, well, now my imagination's there. You're going to constantly be striving for whatever the thing just out of reach is.
Yeah. I feel really sorry for big studios right now, especially the sort of incumbents that have been around for like 30 plus years because they're so used to building dedicated pipelines. And, these are the same companies that spent, $300,000-400,000 US on an Avid suite in the desk. And even though it's relatively redundant, they're like, yeah, we have to cut on Avid because we spent 300,000 on a desk 20 years ago. Like this is like nightmare times for somebody with that mentality. It's like, how do you keep up?
Well, we were speaking to Lee and he was talking about when he founded the Electric Theater Collective. And he was like, it was just at that point where everybody was like, here's the space to put the Digibeta. And that was a $200,000 piece of kit. And he went, I think we can just gaslight the clients into only taking sort of HD, sort of video
Yeah.
files and sending them around in hard drives, and just get out of spending that 200K. And of course, in every other, VFX studio in London, they were still spending on, or they were either spending on a 200K digibeta or they were watching it gather dust.
Yeah, I honestly, I genuinely, personally feel the same way about virtual production. And I'm someone who made that mistake. We're in a 6,000 square foot soundstage here in the UK. When we first started the company, we were a research outfit. Pigeon Shrine, which is the holding company now for AImation, like that was started as a research vehicle. Even the name is a joke. Pigeon's the god of trash. Everything AI made was terrible. We just kept offering it up. One of the first things we did was we built a virtual production wall. We spent the money, we put it up, and we were really trying to hybridize what Gen AI and virtual production could do. And now it sits there collecting dust, and I think this will be the outcome for most of these VP stages. Although, a lot of people will try and burn me at the stake for saying that, but it's true. That is the state. That's where these walls are headed.
Or, obviously there's so much to chat about with you. There's your background, obviously in VFX, also in production. You've been a producer, you've been a writer, you've been a director, and what's fascinating to me about your sort of story is that you've created the first feature, created entirely in AI. That what's fascinating to me about that with your story is it's a very human story. You've been able to level up and experience and show your ability to tell storytelling in sci-fi, which is a very rarefied era. I mean, most producer directors, don't get that opportunity, and you've worked with Malin Ackerman and you've done, productions and proven your ability to direct. But then these tools have just leveled you up and put you into a different place. And then there's just generally the technical achievement of where the robots grow. And I was really struck by was the character permanence. I felt really connected to all of those characters, so much so that my partner and I, when we were watching it, we were yelling at the screen at a certain point. We were sort of aghast. And I won't give away what happens, but one of the characters gets removed from the storytelling. And we were yelling at the screen. Now, everybody focuses on, well, can it make you cry or whatever? Yes, we didn't cry, but we were emotionally compelled enough that we were yelling out at the screen going, well, why can't he just do this? And this would be possible. And that just shows a connection enough to the character that we were visibly angered.
Yeah, I don't mind spoiling it. It's been out for a while. I mean, we it was like we broke the cardinal rule, like we killed the dog. In a kid's film. So,
yeah. It was a very cute robot named Number 2 who sort of, as you say, takes on the role of the dog and then also learns to speak a little bit. And so it becomes even more anthropomorphized. So you grow in your relationship to it and then you kill the dog. And, and then... then later on, there's another robot that goes, and I'm like, well, he could have had his battery if he just brought him along, And I honestly don't say that to have a go at the storytelling. I say that because, it's the thing everybody's been saying is not possible, is that I could be invested enough that instead of going, well, this is just stupid, whatever, I didn't walk away. I went, well, but why? Why couldn't he?
Well, look, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I think you've made me sound a lot more interesting than I probably feel, which is nice of you. Thanks for that.
Well, it's the proof's in the pudding, so your opinion on that fact doesn't matter.
But it weirdly, I think my background in indie cinema weirdly kind of makes myself and AImation as a whole, we're sort of, we're like the DeepSeek of this AI film space in the sense that, lack of resources really forced us to innovate and push as hard as we can, and do, I'm always very inspired, to do the thing that you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to kill the dog. Okay, fine, let's get rid of the dog. And, you're not supposed to make a film using generative AI and AI tools in the middle of an actor's strike about AI. But, I was like, well, hey, we're in the UK and I can do what I want. So we went there, and even the release around it, for those people that aren't aware, AImation is actually a platform, GVOD platform that we are in closed beta at the moment on and doing better than we could have hoped, which is great. And where the robots grow was kind of like, okay, we knew we were building the platform, and we'd also made this film. And it was actually the second movie that we made using this. We've got an entirely different film called Moonquake, which is also Gen AI powered. I think you will see that this year. I think we've held it back for the platform because it's just that sort of level above. So we decided to hold it back. And we got into some really interesting conversations. People don't realize that we made that movie last March. 9 people made it in 90 days, And like you say, the tech wasn't really where we wanted it to be at that point. But, I'm proud of the results. I'm proud of what we got to do. And it was very interesting. Like straight away, we had lots of big Hollywood interest. I went from that scrappy indie director that's been doing films for Redbox. And suddenly I'm sitting in Universal's office with the bosses and, meeting A-list actors. And the thing with me
the classic overnight success that took 10 years.
I think the thing is, though, I think it came at a good point in my career because, and I'm not just saying this. This is true. I've been in the film industry for like 10 years, and like I'm just thoroughly unimpressed by that. Like I don't care. Like I didn't give a shit. I was like, cool. How much are you going to pay for this? Or and then we got into these discussions with a pretty big distributor, and we nearly sold it to them. And then I saw the contract was like, yeah, we're going to release it end of Q2, beginning of Q3, 2025. And the tech company in me was just like, no. And so we just put it online. And, that was interesting.
We should say that, anybody listening, where the robots are, you can, search it on YouTube right now and watch it. It's, and that's the other great thing is it's immediately available. And I think you did exactly the right thing. But sorry, go on.
Yeah, it was funny because we took it to some of these big YouTube channels and we were like, people that have got like 5 million subs and, regularly get hits. Like, hey, do you want this? We'll do it with you. And we kind of got the same response. They were like, yeah. And then they found out it was AI and they were like, we're kind of scared of getting shouted at. And so we were like, okay, fine. We'll just build our own channel. We know that the point of all of this is to create interest in the platform itself. And so we put it out there. And just so you know, we finished building our back of house platform, which is called On the Geno 1. Now you could make Where the Robots Grow with that platform with 2 people in 6 weeks. You could make the same film at a probably slightly better standard. And we've gone ahead and we've made 10 movies and pilots since January the 20th. We're in the process of scaling up now. So, I'm very much about, removing barriers and just doing what's in your head. Like, answer the other thing you were saying. Like, I also genuinely care about storytelling. Like, I really care about theme. I care about exploring theme. And honestly, like, I don't think the medium in which you tackle exploring theme through story really matters, whether you're doing it as a play or as a book or as an AI movie. The rules have been the same for, 5,000 plus years. And, if you can hit those beats, then you can connect to an audience, I hope.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting. We've talked about this a few times on the podcast that with YouTube unseating Disney as the #1 TV distributor in America, I think it's the creative communities or the legacy film and television industry have always kind of looked down their nose at YouTube. And I think kind of, this notion that certain things are real creativity and certain things aren't. And usually the differentiator is craft. And I think that, now that these tools are out there, I think that what you're going to see is it's going to take away that rarefied air of mystery. But what it is going to do is it's going to mean that anyone who maybe has some latent ability as a storyteller is going to be able to showcase it. They're going to be able to do it more. And, as we can all tell in most creative, worlds, doing it more is the thing that is probably the biggest differentiator to being good or not. If you can tell 3 to 5 stories a year and see what's working, see what's not, you're far more likely to become a really expert storyteller. And I think that, a lot of that's going to be happening everywhere. The culture is not going to be just defined by New York and London and LA.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, you're absolutely right. Like, you know, and I see myself very much as a futurist. Like, you know, the thing that I've been very good at throughout my whole career has been kind of seeing where the chess pieces are moving and kind of getting ahead of that. You know, when it came to the DSLR movement, I was one of the first out the gate, which is how I ended up doing all those indie movies, you know, and I saw the writing on the wall with Gen AI very early, you know, and so we kind of maneuvered into that place. And honestly, I think you're right when you bring up YouTube, and in terms of like, okay, why is YouTube become the powerhouse that it has? Why are people going home and choosing to put YouTube on instead of a traditional show that's been made for an awful lot of money? And like, there's a few things that are going on here mechanics wise that I find really interesting. Like, one is you're right, the craft or the QC bar, like the level of quality control was really the barrier that Hollywood had. And the audience has sort of decided for Hollywood to lower the quality control bar without asking for permission. They just said, I'm actually all right with watching, you know, these two guys talk on a podcast with no production value. That's fine for me. You know, and so that's a problem. And then the other thing is, you're right, craft, you know, you fine tune what your audience want. And when you're on YouTube as a creator and you're not beholden to approvals and signing off, you're making stuff very rapidly and you're getting very good at giving the audience what they want, ditching what they don't want. You're fine-tuning your craft. And it doesn't work like that in traditional film. In traditional film and TV, you know, you write something and it's normally at least a year out before it appears in front of anyone's eyes. And so, you know, I think we're losing the battle, traditionally speaking, because of immediacy and relevancy. Like, nothing that is being made traditionally feels immediate. It doesn't feel relevant. And AI really changes that. And then I think the other problem that Hollywood cannot see coming, and they should be, I mean, if I was them, this would be my sole focus on trying to figure out how do we stop this now before it gets out of hand? Because within the next 3 years, we're going to see a new form of piracy emerge on YouTube specifically, but also on X and you know, Vimeo, Facebook. And it's not going to be the kind of piracy they're used to tackling, like where before you had to worry about someone comes to your cinema and films on a camcorder and then leaks it online on a torrent. Now what you're going to have to deal with is, let's say there's a factory in Taiwan that is currently making counterfeit Nike footballs, you know, 300,000 of them a day. And then they put them into the marketplace and they know that 90% of them are going to get caught. But for the 10% that make it through, it's monetarily worth it to play this game. In the next 3 years, those same factories in Taiwan are going to make 300,000 Pirates of the Caribbean films. They'll be 2 hours long. Some of them will be great. Some of them will be terrible. They'll be monetized throughout the whole internet in such a never-ending wave that if you're Disney making a 150 million Pirates film, how do you combat this? And worse, now the audience starts to see your IP as AI, and don't watch that. And so now
they can churn the franchise out as though it's in television episodes. You know, you could have the new Pirates movie comes out and then they're going, okay, well, we've turned this episodic and now there's 22 episodes within, you know, 2 years. You know, how
do you fight this? You will spend billions of dollars trying to pull down this material, right? And it will always be economically worth it for these pirate outfits to put it out because, well, you know, we made $50 here, $100 there. The cost of production for us was zero, you know. So they're in a real bad spot, and you can see the music industry going through it now. You know, Drake is the most copied AI artist on the planet, and he's going to have to do what Grimes has already done, which is go, okay, it's just 50-50. If you use my voice and name, we just split the revenue 50-50. And I can genuinely see a version of Hollywood in the immediate future where that becomes a primary economic driver for them, where it's like, look, we don't make anything. We just split the revenue 50-50 with the
we just manage IP and licenses.
I can see that coming.
That's fascinating. Yeah, that's a really good point. Sorry, I'm trying to sort of unpack all of the different ways in which that kind of matters and happens. It seemed that Hollywood got it in the 90s when people were sort of at Sundance coming out with movies on Handycam. You sort of thought, oh, okay, Hollywood's getting it. That actually story is what matters. All of this sort of fine sheen and stuff is maybe extraneous to good storytelling, character driven. I mean, going back to 1970s cinema, is all character driven rather than plot driven. And then I really thought that was going to happen when Sean Baker did Tangerine on an iPhone. I was like, oh, they're really going to get that, like, this is the new form of storytelling. And then it sort of didn't happen again. And Sean kind of went into that, the more traditional place. YouTube just picked up that ball and ran with it. The IP realities are fascinating as well. We've been a part of some very high-level conversations with studios as they're wrestling with user-generated content. The thing that they're constantly trying to do, though, is figure out what the sandbox looks like, the shape of the sandbox, because if you're going to let people make their own Hanna-Barbera cartoons, you absolutely can't allow them to take your IP assets and then have Shaggy and Velma going off into a broom cupboard and shaggying. But they get very, and the architecture of that sandbox becomes the thing that holds them back. And actually, it might be interesting them coming to grips with the power of what it looks like when the gloves are off.
It's funny, right? Because you're right about the 90s movement, but I personally think the reason that, the Tangerine coming out on an iPhone 4S didn't create that. And Hollywood as an infrastructure, as a business, and this kind of extends to most of entertainment that emerged, say, prior to 20 years ago. It's based on culture. And the problem is culture doesn't exist anymore. Culture takes time to grow, like an indie film made in the 70s or the 90s. It's spread through word of mouth. It had these long leadways of theatrical time. It's like moss growing on a rock. It takes a while, but once it's embedded in, it becomes a feature of the rock, and that's culture. But then the internet came along, and more specifically, meme culture arrived in the sort of, 2011, 2012. And I think we've got Tim and Eric, awesome job to thank for this. It kind of changed the nature of comedy and made it very memeable. And all of a sudden, this ability for the moss to grow on the rock vanished because the rock is constantly being hosed down every day and starting fresh. And so when you've built an industry that depends on culture to take hold, and suddenly culture is really just like meme culture. Meme culture is like fast. It's immediate. It's relevant. Everybody's talking about Hawk Tour Girl today, and now people are like, "Who's Hawk Tour Girl? What's that?" Or like finding a hat with her name on it. Like, why did I buy this? The cycle is so quick. How do you get an industry that was literally built on the foundations of the moss growing on the rock to survive in this environment? I think the reality is you can't. And this is what you're talking about with the sandbox. They're trying to always go, how do we make the sandbox look like what we've always known? And so what they're doing is they're defaulting back on old IP, stuff that still has cultural name value, the stuff that had time to become a feature of the rock before meme culture arrived. And, now we're just like, okay, let's do that again. Let's do that again. And that's very problematic. And meanwhile, YouTube is doing whatever it wants to do. People are coming out the gates. They're being immediate. They're being relevant. They're just going wild. And so, for us, it was really about looking at that last year and going, okay, how do we use the technology at our hand? How do we rebuild the pipeline from the ground up so that it's much more focused on being immediate and relevant? But instead of being user-generated content, how do we build an ecosystem, a sandbox that's focused on professional-generated content, literally? How do we go after all these displaced people in Hollywood, all the people that are about to find themselves out of work, that have got a very broad sense of language when it comes to cinema, and how do we retrain them and retarget them and make them part of this new system, and also create a place where the user goes, okay, if it's on YouTube, quality might vary, but if it's on these guys, it's not a subscription service, I've got a habitual relationship with it, and it's probably pretty good. So I think that's where we are. We're kind of trying to build the first steps on that ladder that I think will become a very important ladder when this form of piracy arrives in 3 years' time.
Right. So let's getting into animation. The stated premise of it was that with a team of 9, you could do what you did with Where the Robots Grow, and that you could, within sort of 90 days or 120 days, whatever that time frame is, with a team of 9 people, you could make a feature film. I imagine you just said that now it's down to kind of teams of 2, and but how does it work? How does it work best? And what exactly are you building? I'd love to just hear more about it.
Yeah, I mean, look, my background is in VFX, post-production, coding. So it's kind of like, okay, let's bring these skill sets together. And I personally was very frustrated with traditional filmmaking because you front load production, you front load prep with the budget. And, like I think anybody that knows, I'm a writer and a director, but I also happen to be just okay at those things. I'm a much better editor than I am at those other two. And so, I think I always felt like the film gets made in the edit, end of story. Like the editor is really God. People don't want to hear that, but it's true. It's the final draft of the script. It's where the movie is actually becomes a functioning thing. And it's the thing that no budget is given to, no time and attention is given to. And when the film turns out horribly, they blame post. They say, oh, well, it's VFX's fault that, we've got Cats, the movie.
Right.
Really, it's a very different issue that caused that.
Yeah.
So like I really set out initially to go, okay, it was COVID, everybody was not doing a lot, I set out to go, okay, let's use this time to try and reinvent the wheel. Like if film was being created today from scratch and you didn't have to follow any of these conventions, how would you go about it? And so we settled on this idea of post first. We'll do post first and then use generative AI.
And so you started this before the first AI tool, the first highly developed AI tools came out.
Yeah, so we started the company. So it was percolating conceptually from like late 21. And we officially launched the company, I think, in June of 2022. I think we were on mid-journey version 2 at that point. No chat GPT, that had not launched yet. That wasn't a thing. I think that came out in the November of that point. But, again, it was like I felt very strongly. I was like, look, I'm looking for a Netflix moment here. And Netflix didn't become Netflix because of streaming. It was a convergence of events. They realized technological innovation was going to come. And so they figured out how to do a distribution pipeline for 1080p content, even though the tech would only let them do 360p right now. And they got way ahead and they were like, okay, when it arrives, we're first, we're already there, we know what we're doing. And so when everybody else is trying to figure out suddenly, oh, we've got to technologically innovate now, they were already at the economic innovation point. And so I was like, okay, I can see this coming. We need to do this as well. We need to be technologically innovating right now. I don't know what the product is. I don't know where we're going. I just know that we need to figure out what production looks like in this era. And then by the time everybody else figures it out, we should be openly talking about the economic innovation. But this is how you make money from this. This is the impact that it's going to have on your traditional distribution routes. So that's really where this started. And we spent a lot of time and a lot of resources. We tried every angle, hybrid productions, fully generative ones. And it was really that one that convinced me, okay, this is the future. And very quickly we realized that filmmaking like this, its closest cousin is documentary filmmaking. That's the closest relationship. Well, if you think about how you make a documentary, let's say me and you go, right, we want to make a documentary about somebody who's been in prison for 20 years and we want to free him. We're the producers. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to hire somebody to go and collect as much material as they can. Yeah, and then we're going to give that to an editor and we're going to say like get this down into like something watchable. And then we're probably going to hire a director and that person's going to come in and look at this first cut and go, well, you should focus more on this. We should shoot some recreation footage. Can we get some interviews from here? And so that's a very post-first approach to putting a story together. And Gen AI lets you do that, basically. We come to the party with a script, then we go out and we try to collect as much material as we can that represents that script. Then we edit it down into something just about watchable. And then we go, okay, let's change this. Let's tweak that. Let's go here, and notes becomes part of it. And so what we ended up doing is we built a 242-page system prompt guide in-house here last year that is essentially, okay, this is how you make an AImation production. This is how one person puts 22 minutes of anime together in 2 weeks. And we found it very labor intensive, not from the work perspective, bizarrely, but from trying to protect the material, because I also think that, chain of title is going to rapidly change here, where, Right now, let's say we're making our documentary. I need a contract. You need a contract. Then we get some contracts for the material and the editor. But in the Gen AI space, we're going to need a contract for every single shot. Like, where did it come from? What did the prompt say? Because there's a version of this where you go to court one day, and this happens in the traditional space. There'll be no difference between somebody coming after you for copyright infringement in the AI world as there is in the traditional world. Like, forget the input argument. That is a different argument. Like, how they trained it, well, that's the companies. They'll have to do their buyouts or whatever they do, and they'll probably end up something like PRS is how it will end up. But then the output of this, let's say somebody takes me to court, like the guy who took Disney to court from Moana, and says, oh, you guys stole Moana from me. Disney had to prove that they didn't have the intent and that they didn't have the means of access. And if they'd have lost on one of those points, that guy wins a giant payout or the rights to Moana, which is a disaster. So we got to do the same thing here. And that means you have to have very documented prompts. You need to make sure that you don't have some rogue employee that puts in the style of Pixar in a prompt. So you actually spend a lot of labor and man-hour documenting your process. So we built the Omnigen 01 platform, which is all of our 242-page system prompts behind a backend, and it lets us API key into new tools as they come out. But it also does all of this stuff for you. So, it's a very sort of by the numbers, easy approach for content rights holders, for IP holders. They can come to us and they can say, yo, I really want to make an anime using your pipeline. And we can say, absolutely, it's a business-to-business service. We'll charge the user a nominal fee. They'll pay as they go for the tokens that they use. And we'll hardwire into it, look, we also want a non-exclusive contract for the rights to that content for the AImation platform, but you can also do what you want with it, or you can buy us out of that license agreement. And so the idea is to try and make what we've built here accessible to you guys, to anybody. If you're sitting on 10 scripts right now, that you spent a fortune on development and none of them are going anywhere, well, now they can go somewhere. Come and talk to us. And so the business is really a kind of a true end-to-end solution where it's like, we want to work with IP holders. We want to make content fast and at speed, but we also want to give you a home to economically monetize this in the incoming wave of content wars that AI is about to bring as well.
And so your ideal user is a filmmaking professional at the moment.
Well, so you're talking about two sides of the company. So the front end platform, the GVOD platform is everyday consumers.
Yeah, consumers who want to kind of see what people have made,
Yeah, and you have to think about it like real short. I don't know if you've heard.
And presumably, eventually, you'll open that up as well. Once you get a bunch of users and they're paying and whatever else, and you guys have some profit kicking around, you go, we really like this thing somebody's made over there and they haven't made it with our platform, but we'd really like to show this to our users. So you have that economic model. And then separately, you have the sort of, I imagine a range of low use to high touch relationship to filmmaking professionals or people who have the financial resource to be able to explore whether this could be done.
We called it AImation for a reason. I truly believe it's an emergent media space. It's not traditional. It's not traditional film. And I don't like when I hear people say, AI is just a tool. I'm like, it's not a tool, guys. That's you being disingenuous about what's happening here. Because, when I worked in VFX, the client used to say, oh, isn't there just like a dinosaur button that you press and then you get the T-Rex? And you'd be like, no, I've got to sit here and ray trace this and render it for like 6 weeks. But AI is a render. It's a dinosaur button, right? It's an agentic relationship with something where you, the creator, say, I want you to go off and bring me these things back. Like, it's not a tool. It's an agentic relationship with something unique. And so I'm very keen on being like, look, this is its own separate lane. You have traditional animation, traditional media. I love and respect both of them, but that's not what this is. And we should stop pretending that it is. And I think that opens up lots of interesting discussions because we have a platform that is built around the same economic microtransaction model as something like Real Short, except for horizontal content. Your content can have a life outside of that ecosystem. You can sell it to Netflix when you're done with it. You can basically treat us like a theatrical window, And if you don't know who Real Short are, it's fascinating. They are vertical short bite content where the user's forced to touch the screen every minute and a half. And they're doing about $120 million of revenue a month currently from questionable content, shall we say. So we're trying to create that infrastructure and that market for professionals to make long form content using AImation and also not affect your careers. Like, you know what, you want to go and work in traditional film, fine. Like still go direct that movie. But if you're sitting on 10 scripts that you're like, these are never going to get going, well, why don't you turn them into valuable IP, build up an audience, make them in an anime format or something? There's a home to distribute them on. You've still got the IP rights. You can do what you want with it. And essentially that's kind of the model that we're building. We're trying to build an end-to-end trusted infrastructure for professionals and for the users where you go, we know this is AI, we know what it is, and it's cool. We like it. This is what we want to watch.
Yeah. The head of YouTube was on The Town with Matt Belloni the other day, and he was just saying, listen, when we see Mr. Beast go off and make Beast games with a network, we're super proud of him. That's not the place that we play in. We're not trying to play in that place. We look at him and look at all of our creators and go, this is the opportunity that's available to you. Look at the path we've created. This amazing stage we've created to take you from where you are now to doing what Mr. Beast is doing. If he goes off and does that, we have all these other creators that we're trying to work with.
Absolutely.
And I think that model is smart.
Yeah, we call what we do GVOD because you're swiping on the left and right of the screen habitually every 30 seconds. You're earning coins in app as you're watching. And then you get a microtransaction at round about every 6-minute mark, and you can watch an advert, or you can pay to unlock with the coins that you've earned, or you can buy coins. So there's a mobile gaming element fused onto it that doesn't interfere with the content. You're not choosing the story. It's linear stuff, And so that means you can just take this and you can use this as an economic route where we're in, like I say, we're in closed beta right now, but we're already seeing 8.74 is our average for sessions per device, which is mobile gaming level high. We're seeing early signs of people who are, it's been in closed beta for 3 weeks, and we've got one guy who's got nearly 90,000 coins in that space of time. We don't know who these people are. And so there's real data now to back up what we're saying, which is, look, you're always going to get people that are going to go watch this on YouTube at home. We want you to do that. We want you to sell it to Hulu. We want you to sell it to Netflix. But we also want you to think about, in this economic market, in this day and age, like, what's your theatrical window? Where are you putting this to make the money that you used to get from AMC cinemas? And so, a lot of meetings that I do, people go, oh, you're trying to be the Netflix of AI. I'm like, no, Netflix will be the Netflix of AI. YouTube is the YouTube of AI. But what we are trying to be is the AMC cinemas of AI. Like, come and put it with us for 6 weeks, monetize it till, you've drained as much as you can from it, and then go and sell window 2 and window 3 elsewhere. We'll be proud of you. We want you to do that. And you can use the Omnigen platform to be immediate and relevant. You can keep your content coming fast all year. Like, there's no reason to sit on this. And if Hollywood comes calling and suddenly they want to make a $150 million version, great. You've never done it in live action. Go knock yourself out. That's absolutely fine. You own the rights.
It occurs to me that executives probably just won't read scripts anymore. They'll expect this to be the way that a script is packaged to them. You're like, oh, okay, like send me the film you made with it. And I'll decide if I'm interested.
I mean, look, I actually know execs. I won't say names, but I had a meeting recently where the guy literally said to me, he's like, yeah, I don't read the scripts anymore. I just asked ChatGPT if it's any good. And I'm like, you've got an enterprise account, right? You're not just chucking that in there. It's like, yeah, why? Is that bad? It's like, yes.
Yes, very, very bad.
So that is kind of the world that we live in right now. But like, you're quite right. Like for me, I just think this is a way, for people who consider themselves serious filmmakers to fight back against the user-generated content march, where you can be part of it. You can be part of professional-generated content. You can exploit all of the stuff you wrote that just is too weird to get the green light without proving it's got an audience. And you can do it in such a way where you can take advantage of all of your traditional avenues, all of the contacts that you've got, and you can have a theatrical window with us if you want it. And so, I really think we've spent this last 3 years really kind of not just trying to tackle one element. Like, we've built a truly end-to-end solution for everybody from indie film studios to those sort of mid-level husband and wife teams that have got like, They had a big hit in 2014, but it's not been going so great lately. All the way up to the majors who are having conversations with us, and we'll see where that goes. But I think that AI is a completely emergent space, and if treated like it doesn't displace the other two. It just becomes a brand new lane, and that's what it should be.
And I think that the other thing is that, Dakota Johnson was just talking the other day about how risk averse studio executives are, and that's no news. And we're seeing it with the studio, the Seth Rogen show of, he has this great quote where he says, studio executives are people who love movies, whose job it is now to ruin movies.
Yeah, I saw it.
And he goes, we always forget that they came to this job because they deeply, deeply love movies. But yeah, it's funny. I think that with that risk aversion, you positioning yourself as something where also the data that comes along with what you're doing when releasing it, the ability to say, there's data to be captured before box office. And up until now, that's not really been possible. You either release it on YouTube and then it's kind of out there and it's done and then it has no box office value, or it's released through your platform where it's still, protected. That can be a proving space where people can go, well, we were number one for 3 months on this platform. And look at how many people are microtransacting to watch this thing and look at how many people want to skip the ads. This is a person who's never skipped the ads before. And this film is so compelling, they're now skipping the ads. Those sorts of things. Suddenly you go to, the studios and the distributors and you say, this is a rare thing. And this has data to support that users really like it. Maybe it is worth, investing the money in distribution.
Absolutely, man. I mean, data and box office don't have to be mutually exclusive from one another. In fact, on a platform like ours, they go hand in hand because you can see engagement levels in real time. You can actually track what that one specific film is making or that one show is making because we're not subscription based. When you're a subscription service, the psychology around this is very different. I used to pay $15 for a CD. It would have 12 tracks on it. And I was like, this is value for money. And now for $15, if you as a company are asking me to onboard, to commit now $15 for every month for the year, I want every song ever written and I want it immediately or I'll cancel you. And so their game becomes like a customer retention algorithm where I log on to Netflix, I see 10 new titles, the thumbnails have been customized to me. I'm never going to watch any of these things. None of them are my taste, but there's just enough there that I'm like, I'm still getting value for money, so I won't cancel my subscription. But microtransactions work very differently. We just have to be on your phone and you only have to come for one thing that you like every week or every month and watch that one thing, pay the $20 that you might have, in terms of advert revenue, swiping, engagement, and we set the coin prices very similar to Real Short. That company for me was a big eye-opening moment when I saw what they were doing with sub $300,000 Hallmark films and that the audience was like, I'll happily pay $20 to watch 90 minutes of the billionaire husband who cheated with my sister because I'm choosing to pay for this. This is my choice. It's my $20 and I'm choosing, and you get, so that freemium model was immediately when we were kind of, okay, we fixed the technological innovation side of this. We're ready. It was like, okay, now how do you do this? Because there's going to be the AI film wars for the next 2 years where streamers are like, I don't know what we're allowed to take. What should we take? Where will the backlash be? But the creatives will slowly more and more start to do stuff. And this is a slowly building tidal wave. But in amongst that's the same sort of curved tidal wave that made Netflix who they are today. And if we carry on the way we're going and we consistently prove ourselves to not just the audience, but to the filmmakers, and we let them into the Omnigeno One platform, then that crest is going to look like, okay, most of you guys can come and play in the AI sandbox, know that you've got a place to put this stuff, know that you can send it there without disrupting your other income and without angering anybody so badly, because you're being upfront with the consumer. You're saying, yeah, it's called AImation and it's on AImation and we're not messing with anything. And then eventually that crest comes down. Everybody says, oh yeah, we're fine with AI now. But in amongst that, we emerge as, yeah, but these guys are like the AMC cinemas. We go there because we trust that stuff. We want our stuff on that platform. Their tool is embedded in our workflow. It's our version of a red camera. So, that's really been what we've been building. And yeah, so far so good.
Great. Can I ask, so what if you were to sit down right now and say, using your platform, using, the systems that you've created, you or a creator wants to make a feature-length sci-fi movie, what is the optimal staffing? What is the optimal system that you then take through that 90 days? What does that look like?
Well, it won't take you 90 days anymore, that's for sure, unless you want to. It's what you can do though is you can iterate a lot. If you're like I say, the system that we provide it's all in one. It lets you use all of the tools that are available. Like you don't have to go, we're stuck using this and really we want VO3. That'll be built in via API. So you pay as you go. You're setting your own token price. You're saying, look, if we've spent $7,000 on this, if we've spent $20,000 on this, whatever it took to get us to the place we're happy with it, that's up to you. And you can iterate as many times as you want. Optimally, so for instance, we've got a team of people in-house here. There's 6 of them total. Every 2 to 3 weeks, they produce 22 to 25 minutes of completed anime, which has been gone through the showrunner approach. So we've sat down, we've given notes, we've retooled it a few times. So you're talking, it's normally like draft free by the end of that 3 weeks. So like very fast, very efficient, And it all depends on what kind of filmmaker you are. You're going to get some Trey Parkers and Matt Stones that see this tool and be like, yeah, I'm going to have a professional 25-minute episode of a comedy show like a Rick and Morty every Monday, every Friday, without fail, using this tool. And then you're going to get filmmakers that come along and you're like, I'm going to spend 6 months on this, but it's going to be AAA standard. By the time I get to that end of 6 months, we've made the film 20 times. And we're really certain that this is the right one. And so there's lots of advantages to using this from a creative perspective. Me personally, the thing that I'm most vested in is emergent media. I'm more interested in the media that doesn't exist right now that we can do with AI. I'm personally heading up our AI reality TV line at the studio, which is as crazy as it sounds. Yeah, so I mean, look, it's the great thing about AI is that there is a weird fascination, I think, as a human when you're looking at something behaving very human and it isn't. There's something strange and like visceral that happens inside of you, and I also think it's probably where all this AI discourse comes from. We as humans are the only things as far as we know, that have been capable of art. I said recently, I was like, look, if one dog started painting at a very professional level, we'd all be like, wow, that's so cool. But if every dog on earth started doing it, we were like, I hate dogs. The dogs need to stop. And I think we're in a place with this where it's like, okay, we're watching this system that we know isn't human doing human stuff. And to me, that kind of presented a really interesting opportunity. And there were a few things we saw a demo a few years back for somebody hooked ChatGPT 3.5 into an Unreal Engine demo of the Matrix game that had just come out. And he was running around trying to tell these non-player characters that they were in the Matrix. And they were like, no, I'm not, you're lying. And it was very interesting to watch. Then in-house, we also, we were vibe coding and we made a game called Sentient Snake, where we let the snake hook into ChatGPT-4, and it was running around questioning why it was eating so much and was it getting too long, and it was just very fascinating. And so from there, we kind of like, okay, there's actually an emergent media lane here. And so, over the last 6 months, we've been building something called non-player combat. There's a demo of it on the closed beta now. Non-player combat is we take 6 NPCs. We've given them all very detailed backstories, 200 plus pages. They think they've got lives and jobs and debts and, they know where they went to school. And then we let these characters fight it out in a Hunger Games arena for 4 weeks in real time, and it's littered with all the things you would expect. There's dirty drinking water. They have to find shelter, food. But they're also trying to kill each other for what they think is 1 million coins. So it's basically the Hunger Games for real. And it's fascinating because you realize, like, no one's making these choices for them. No one's in charge of this. Like, it's happening organically. Choices are being made by these characters. And we ran the simulation here in-house, and there's an alarm that goes off whenever anything happened. And everybody would just drop everything and run to the TV so we could see what was going on. And so what we've done is we've cut that down into 6 episodes, 6 half-an-hour episodes. It's called Non-Player Combat. It will be out at some point this year. And we really think this will be the main user acquisition device for the platform.
Right.
I think AI reality TV will become a very emergent line as we start to live and work alongside these things more and more. It becomes a more fascinating exploration of, what this really means for us. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Wow, that's amazing, because it reminds me a little bit of, when Big Brother first came out. I don't know, most people won't remember this, but in the first couple of seasons, they would cut to psychologists who would say, oh, well, Jade Goody's doing this, and what she's trying to do is assert her dominance. And she's, and it was, I found that very fascinating. Of course, it got, removed from the format, but I always found that really fascinating. And I think that, there is something very interesting about, okay, how are these things thinking? How are they solving problems? Understanding that from a sort of, the fascination of the ghost in the machine. I think that is very, very interesting.
Well, I mean, there were things that in there that, for me, as somebody who's very invested in the AI space from a philosophical perspective, that I found mind blowing. When an AI character is being, a two-faced liar, has befriended somebody else and then stabs them in the back, 2 hours later, you're like, okay, wow, these things lie. Okay, that's where we are. That's where we are then, And the black box of it all makes it so interesting. And look, from a studio boss perspective, yes, I think the interesting thing about this is playing in those morally gray areas where you're like, is this okay that I'm watching this? Like, is this okay? And it's like, yeah, I guess it is and it isn't.
We're not doing it with humans, so it's fine.
And there's honestly, there are a lot of interesting formats out there in the reality TV space that you're just like, you can't do that, where an AI presents the opportunity to go, yeah, but what if you did? Like, what if you ran that experiment? Well, and you can cut these things into a way that are very digestible. Like, non-player combat feels like you're watching Naked and Afraid or Alone. It's got that kind of vibe to it. And it's amazing, how quickly you fall in love with characters that are essentially their own entities that are not real.
So much of this space, and we've experienced it ourselves, is just explaining the same thing over and over and over again. I mean, what do you wish, in the people you speak to, what do you wish came prepackaged in their software that you didn't have to kind of explain?
I think when, especially when I'm answering these questions about like, why, we don't want this, you get the sort of the, and I think it's very important to have those conversations. Human beings are really bad at change. We're really bad at accepting that, things are always in flux. People forget that the first iPhone was only 2008.
Yeah.
They just act like they've always been here. And, I always think to myself...
And the only good thing it did was that beer app. That was the only. that was the only thing that really worked. Email barely worked. It barely made calls. Everything dropped out. But that beer app was.
You could do the beer app, yeah. But like, if I was the heir to an alarm clock company in 2007, I would be like, life's going to be great for me. And then the iPhone comes out a year later. Like, no one cares about the alarm clock guys now. We were all like, it created millions of jobs in the app sector that wouldn't have existed. And the thing that I think people would really take into account when having these conversations is like, stop thinking about the immediate and then just from an economic perspective for yourself, like jump forward 18 months because there are more, like I said earlier, like Netflix isn't Netflix because of streaming. It was like a bunch of converging situations. And for me, the most pressing one right now is right now there are 3.8 billion internet users on the planet, but there's 8 billion people. So what are the other 3.2 billion people doing? Well, they're the people making your stuff so that you can go online and complain about the world. And the thing that's really fascinating to me is in the next 18 months, because of technological innovation, companies like Google are rolling out like short throw Wi-Fi to regions in India and Nigeria, areas in China that never had access to regions that have never been on the internet. Like, they don't know what Facebook is. They don't care about your Substack blog. They don't know what this is. And in the next 18 months, 1.2 billion new internet users are going to come online for the first time. and they're going to enter an internet that is already Gen AI enabled. They're going to find ChatGPT straight away. They're going to find Sora. They're going to find Google VO3. If you don't think that 1.2 billion new internet users, AI superpowered, aren't going to cause widespread economic innovation and destruction in both equal measures, you're crazy. So stop having a go at people who are trying to innovate now, because these are the people you're going to need the most in the next 18 months, because job losses are coming, but there are 1.2 billion people coming also, and they bring with them an entirely new outlook that's AI powered, and it means big trouble for the way we currently live. And so I think if people knew that, the conversations would be a lot more nuanced. You would have a lot more nuance around, hey, let's start planning for this. Let's start being smart, because this isn't just a question of AI. This is a question of actual human manpower entering the digital workforce in a scope we have not seen for 20 years.
God, that's a fantastic way to look at it, because I agree. I think it's shocking because we've seen so many major innovations in our lifetime. I mean, from the beginnings of the internet to mobile telephony, and then smartphones, and then Bitcoin, and then AI. And in each case, it's been proven that the people who jumped on it first were able to thrive. And now whole ecosystems and economies are built up around each of these pieces of technology. And as well, the technology has just improved exponentially. And I think that that's the thing that shocks me, is when people look at the Apple VR glasses, and everybody's like, well, it's a bit shit. And I was like, it's a bit shit now.
Yeah.
But you don't think that they're learning huge amounts of things that are going to be awesome when they put out their smart glasses like that? That's where that's going. And I can't believe people aren't seeing it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm glad you brought AR up. Again, like I said earlier, I like to see myself as a futurist, and everything we built around AImation's GVOD platform is because I wholeheartedly believe in the next 5 years, your phone will be in your pocket powering your AR glasses. And when that happens, okay, forget all the other big existential stuff. Let's just say it's just about film. How are you going to get someone to go and sit in the cinema and watch your film when they've got a big screen built into their glasses? And so we designed that app to keep that user's hands busy and let them have a theatrical experience when AR arrives. It's pre-built for that. It's a classic mistake of the film industry. The film industry attracts ego just by its nature. And right now they think AI is all about them. This is all about us. And it's okay, this isn't green screen. My accountant doesn't need a green screen and won't put one in his office, but my accountant will have AI on every computer. And if you don't do something about this, your accountant will be a way better filmmaker than you are, and it won't be long before they realize it, and that's the end of you.
Yeah, that's another great point. Well, Tom, thank you so much for this. I have one question that I do ask everybody towards the end of the interview, and I had a boss named Dan Wyden. He had this great quote, and it was that you're useless to me until you've failed big at least twice. And so, I'm sort of asking, can you remember would you be willing to admit a time where you kind of failed, big or small, and what you learned from it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been working in movies for 20 years. I'm 40. I just look fresh-faced, but I hope anyway. I failed a lot.
You do. We're the same age, and you look better than I.
Well, you look great, just so you know.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing with making anything like a movie, is you're sort of bearing your soul. Every movie that I've written, there's something in there that I wanted to talk about. There's something in there that I cared about, and what's really interesting is when, you make these things and you're in these little insular bubble, and then you give it out to people and you just get a tirade of hate back, and they tell you how wrong you are and how you got it all, and it does a few things. It makes you, it made me very thick-skinned where, I was like, okay, fine. But then I very early on, after the second or third movie where, it very much felt like some people really like this, but most people are saying I should fuck off. So you go, Okay, right. And I kind of adopted this rule of thumb that I use to this day. It's a big part of the company here now. We call it the rule of three. And that is, if somebody says something that is, negative or goes against what you believe about something, whether it's the product you're building or the film you're trying to do or the story you're working on, it's an opinion, and you should always listen to an opinion. They're free. There's value in listening to something, but it doesn't mean you have to listen. If you trust your gut, off you go. If two people independent from each other say the same thing, then you should investigate, because there's a chance you could be wrong here. And, again, if you get to the end of that investigation and you feel like, no, my gut's right on this, I'm going to pursue, then good for you. But if three people say something independently identical, then now the likelihood that you are incorrect goes up exponentially. And we should actually sit down and we should have a team meeting about this, and we should course correct before it goes too far. And I think that mentality is helping us as an AI company, because it lets us iterate faster. I'm not that interested in letting anything pursue down a road that doesn't quite work. And ironically, when I started using that in my movies as an approach, three people didn't like this about the thing I did in the last one. Let's try something that doesn't feel organic to me in the next one. And the reviews got better and my career got better. So, I think there's real power in.
Do you think that's the tech, sorry to use the term tech bro, but do you think that's the sort of, the tech background in you?
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is like, if you think you're right all the time, then there's a pretty big problem. Maybe some therapy should be required. Like, the reality is like, getting things wrong is a good thing. If you figure out what was wrong and you fine tune it, you will get better for it. And, I think I occupy a very strange space within. I'm not quite a tech bro. I'm not quite a film bro, but I speak both languages fluently, and I kind of, hover down the middle. So yeah, I think I occupy a very strange space there. But I'm also someone who genuinely believes in self-improvement. Me and my partner, we meditate and do breath work every day, and I think that kind of the point of life is self-improvement. If I ever get to a point where I go, right, I'm perfect now, this is great, then I think there's a problem. I can't see that ever happening. I think when you fail, and if you're willing to listen to failure, you end up better and stronger for it.
Well, that's just the perfect place to end. I mean, that was tremendous, and I mean, absolutely love talking to you, and your perspectives are fascinating and so forward thinking without devolving into, a lot of the cliches, that I've used before as well, whether it's sort of AI as a tool or whether it's the lawyer who, the AI is not going to replace you. It's the lawyer who uses AI who's going to replace you. If I hear it again. But no, I think it's it's fascinating talking to you. I love the movie. I'm really excited to see, the next things coming out. If let us know when that open beta opens up, and I'll be the first one in line.
I'll send you an invite as soon as you have Audrey from
your
team.
That'd be fabulous.
She's already in there and gave us some.
Audrey's already got it.
She's in.
Oh, I see. She's holding out on me. Apparently. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciated it.
Pleasure. And anytime, we'd love to kind of, have you back if you'd be willing, when you launch any of the next stuff, it's we'll be watching.
I don't know if you noticed, but I like talking. So yeah, bring me on a podcast whenever you want. It's fine.
Well, you're very good at it.